In this video, you're gonna learn, see, and get educated about 7 different in-camera transitions that you can use for your videos. The good thing about in-camera transitions is that you don't need to do anything special when it comes to the editing process. These are in-camera transitions, which means that all you need is a camera and an understanding of how the transition works. And from there, the editing process is just so easy. So, if you're ready, I'm ready, let's get into it. Transition 1, the whip transition. Now this is a transition where all you have to do is whip your camera. You can whip it in any direction you want to help you get the effect that you're trying to go for. The key to this transition is getting motion blur when you whip your camera. So I'm gonna grab my camera now. So if you move your camera too slow and move it like this, you're not gonna get the effect. You're really gonna wanna do something like this. And when you do something like that, as you can see, having that motion blur is gonna really help you make that transition extremely seamless. And another key to this movement is all about the direction you whip your camera. So if I'm whipping my camera to my left, you're gonna wanna make sure that when you end that whipping transition, you wanna continue it to the left. So as you can see, with both whip transitions that I did, the first one I ended one scene whipping to the left, and I began the next scene whipping to the left. And I did the exact same thing with the second whipping transition that I did. This is crucial because if you whip your camera in 2 different directions when you're making the transition, it's gonna be extremely jarring to the audience's eye. And when you have something that's that jarring, it's not gonna seem nearly as seamless. So here's an example of what I mean by whipping your camera in 2 different directions when you wanna make that transition. See, it just doesn't look right when you move the camera in 2 opposite directions for your whipping transition. Now, moving on to the second transition, and that is the pull in, pull out transition. All you have to do for this transition is move in and move out. So we're gonna move in and make sure the whole camera is covered when we move in. Then when we pull out, we wanna make sure that the whole camera is covered again as well. That way, when we put it in our editing software, it's gonna be so easy to actually edit the transition. Nobody's ever gonna be able to tell exactly where the transition happens because the camera is actually covered. So as long as you make sure that when you're doing this type of transition, you cover the entire lens, you're gonna be perfectly fine. And the editing process, I promise you, is gonna be extremely easy. And this is another one of those transitions that when done correctly, it's gonna seem extremely seamless and nobody's gonna be able to tell when the transition happens. The third transition is gonna be something extremely similar to the pull in, pull out because you're covering the entire camera, and that is gonna be the cover transition. Now for this one, you don't actually need to move your camera in any direction to actually achieve the transition. All you have to do is grab your camera lens and cover the lens in whatever direction you want to cover it in. And this is another one of those transitions where you want to make sure that your movement is in the same direction. So I don't want to start my cover transition by moving from right to left across the screen and then end up in the next scene by moving right to left. That's again going to be something that's extremely jarring. So you want to keep the motion exactly the same so that, especially when you're editing, everything's going to be that much easier. And we all want to make our lives as easy as possible, especially when it comes to making videos because, let's be honest, making videos is not that easy to do. So the easier we can make things for ourselves, the easier our videos are going to be to make. Now transition number 4, that is going to be the shake transition. This is something where you just grab your camera, cause a lot of chaos by moving the camera around, and then the transition just happens in the middle of all that chaos. Now something extremely important to remember about this transition is that you need to cause as much motion blur as humanly possible. Now if you don't have any type of motion blur in this transition, it's not gonna work. You can try it all you want, but if there's no motion blur, you will not get the achieved transition that you're looking for. And this is a transition that can be a little fun because how often do you really just get to pick up your camera and just start shaking it around all like this whenever you want? And then while you end up shaking it all like that, you just somehow change locations and everything's pretty cool at that point. So there's not very often you get to do something like that with your camera simply because cameras are pretty expensive and you don't want to mess it up by just moving it around like this and changing whatever you can about it and end up potentially dropping the camera. So yeah, just be careful when you do that type of transition so you don't have to end up buying a new camera because, again, cameras are not cheap. Moving on to transition number 5, and that is going to be the sky wipe transition. And this is something that will more than likely require you to be outside when you do it. So I'm gonna go outside, but I'm gonna explain what the transition is real quick. All it is, it's a quick pan up to the sky, pan back down, and the transition happens while the camera is panned up in the sky. You know, you'll see exactly what I mean when you see the transition. So let me run outside real quick. So as you can see, I'm outside now, and I'm gonna show you the sky whip transition. Now we're in the front of my place. So as you can see, sky whip transition. Again, you need to make sure that you have as much motion blur as possible because the motion blur really sells the effect of the transition. All right, now we are gonna move on to our 6th transition, and that is gonna be the clothing change transition. Now the good thing about this transition is that you don't need to do anything with the camera at all. This transition is all about your movements and how you sell the effect. So it's gonna look something like this. That's how it's gonna look. It's gonna look like you just pull your clothes right off and you have something else underneath. Now, the key to this transition is your positioning in front of the camera. Your positioning is very important because if you stay in the same spot while you're doing the transition, it's gonna be so much easier and it's gonna look so much cleaner when you edit the video. However, if I started right here and I moved over here and did the same exact thing, the transition just wouldn't come off the same as it did when you just saw it. So just keep in mind when you're doing a transition like this, when you're doing a clothing change transition, you need to try and keep your body in the same position for the entire time you're recording yourself doing that transition. Because if you're out of place in any way, it's gonna be very hard to put together the edit and make it look as seamless as you want it to look. Now our 7th and final transition is gonna be the clap or the snap transition. This transition happens whenever you clap or snap your fingers and the scenery changes, everything around you changes because of the snap. It's almost like being a genie where you snap your fingers and you change locations and you teleport just like that. So this is an example of what I mean. As you see, snap my fingers, scene changed just like that. It's that simple. Again, this is a transition where you want to stay as close to the same position in both scenes as possible. It's going to look so much better in the end product when you stay in the same position. So again, we went through these 7 in-camera transitions. There is nothing fancy that you need to do for these transitions. Yes, some of them require you to move your camera around. Some of them require you to be in the same exact spot for 2 different takes. Those are very easy things to do, and it's gonna help your editing life so much more. You're not gonna need to do anything fancy in the editing process. All you have to do is cut your footage exactly where you feel the transition should happen. And the tighter you make those transitions, the better the transition is gonna look in your video. Now, it doesn't matter whether that video is for YouTube, it doesn't matter whether it's for TikTok, Instagram, it doesn't matter. All of these transitions apply to whatever type of camera you're using. If you're using a regular camera, if you're using a DSLR or mirrorless camera, if you're using your camera phone, it doesn't matter. All of these transitions can be used on any of those. And when you edit them correctly, they're all gonna come off the exact same and look very seamless. And in the end, these transitions are really gonna help your videos step up a notch. They're gonna help them look so much cooler, and hey, cooler videos get more views, right? So that's something that you might wanna keep in mind. Now that we've gone over everything, I don't have anything else for you other than to say, if you like this video, be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you have time, follow me on TikTok because I teach stuff like this. I teach you how to help make your videos cooler. I teach you how to take better pictures. I just teach you how to get better with a camera on TikTok. And if you want to get better on TikTok, if you want to create cool effects on TikTok, if you want to get better videos onto your TikTok, be sure to follow Pocket Video Academy. Be sure to sign up for it. You're gonna learn a lot of great tools there, and these are gonna be things that really help your videos take that next step forward, and you're gonna thank me in the end. So until the next video, I'm Steven from DareToCapture. Y'all take it easy. Peace.